Hi, everybody. Happy to have you here with me in the locker room. I'm Alan Locher. Tonight, we're taking a trip back to Lanview with two incredibly talented women who left a lasting impression on One Life to Live fans. Danielle Harris, who began her acting career around 7 years old, stole our hearts as Samantha Garretson and went on to become one of the most recognized faces in horror with her iconic roles in Halloween 4, Hatchet, and so many more films. And Shelly Burch, who played the unforgettable and glamorous Delilah Ralston, has had an extraordinary career on stage and screen, from originating the role of Claudia in Broadway's Nine to starring in Annie and Showboat and so much more. Together, they played mother and daughter on One Life to Live, and today they're reuniting with us to share stories, memories, and a look back at where their journeys have taken them since Llanview. Please help me welcome to the locker room Shelly Burch and Danielle Harris.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, ladies.
Hi, Alan.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I think Shelley said backstage that you two have not seen each other since around 1990.
Yes.
That's right, I know.
She looks the same.
Oh, I don't know. Thank you. So, well, you've grown up, I have to say. You're a beautiful young lady.
Aw,
You're a
thank
beautiful
you.
little girl and a beautiful young lady.
Oh,
So
it's good to see you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, Shelley's a mom of 3 and Danielle's a mom of 2. So, yeah, time has gone by. Shelley, take us back to Llanview. What do you remember about your audition or screen test for Delilah?
Well, I was doing a Broadway show. I was doing 9 at the time, and I had just a few minutes to run in and do my audition with Bob Woods, who was Beau. And I had a couple auditions, and then they asked me to come to a screen test. So it happened really quickly. But I was cast as Delilah. I was star of the rodeo. I rode in on a Palomino stallion. It was really quite the entrance. And I fell in love with Beau, but he was my cousin, and so then I married Asa, who was the father, but they really weren't father and son. And then Asa had lied, and so when Asa pretended he was dead, I couldn't stand it anymore. He was so lying and not telling the truth. So then I married Beau, and then I pretended to be pregnant because Beau had gotten Becky Lee pregnant when he was with Becky Lee and I was married to Asa. Anyway, I pretended because I couldn't have kids. And how I had Sammy, which was, if people remember, I mean, Delilah was involved with Anthony McKenna. I danced on the show at Wild Life with poles and, all kinds of crazy things. And Delilah had a little trouble telling the truth. It wasn't that I was a bad person. It was just it was my truth, and which is why Beau left me, and I followed him into the factory, and by then he was with Dee Dee. But Samantha became my best friend because everybody else had kind of turned against Delilah. And when she was found, they thought she was dead, drowned in a hot tub because some robbers had broken into her health club. And I said, well, I'll carry Samantha's baby. So I had the first embryo transplant in the history of television, and that's where Sammy came in. And Rafe asked me to marry him. So I said, you really don't have to marry me just because I'm, carrying your wife's baby. But
only in daytime television, an embryo transplant, right?
It was the first one. And anyway, so I married Rafe and did some other things, was a fashion designer. But Sammy, she went from being a baby to being like 7 really quickly. And they could do that on soaps.
They do. It's called soap opera rapid aging syndrome.
Really? I mean, St. Kevin's we stayed the same. But,
it's got its own acronym for sure. Shelley, is it true you had auditioned, I think, for Search for Tomorrow, Dynasty, and As the World Turns before getting Delilah?
I sure did. And you audition as an actor, as an actress for many things, and you almost get it, and you almost get it. And so that's always a good sign that maybe the next one's going to happen. which I'm sure Danielle knows for her auditions too. And it was, once I had done a screen test for Search and then a screen test for As the World Turns, and of course I was disappointed. But then when I went for One Life to Live, then that was kind of the
where you were meant to be. So Danielle, 7-8 years old, this part comes up. What do you remember about your time in Llanview?
Well, I didn't know that whole backstory. That's for sure. I didn't know that everybody was trolloping around with everybody. I knew that I was a transplant baby from my dead mother into Delilah, and that my father was the chief of police, and that was the extent of what I knew going into it. I think One Life to Live was one of my first auditions. It's an interesting story how I got the part, and I don't think I've ever told it before. I'm working on a book right now, so I'm writing all of this part of my life because this really did start everything, and I'm remembering things that were kind of crazy to think about at that age. So I had booked Spencer for Hire with Robert Urich. It was my very first. Did you do that too?
I sure did.
Oh God, I loved that show.
So I did too. I loved watching it.
Did you? Oh, it was so good. So I had booked this.
It was right on after, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was right on after Charlie's Angels.
Oh, probably. Oh, that was when TV was good. So I auditioned for that. I got the job, and we were filming in Boston. It was a Thanksgiving episode, and I was there for about 2 or 3 days. And I had auditioned, I believe, for One Life to Live before I had left, just like a casting call kind of thing. And when I was in Boston, I got the call that they wanted me to screen test. But I was in another state. But it was like, no, it's going to be, tomorrow. And I had happened to get food poisoning the night before. And all I remember was not being able to go to set on Spencer for Hire because I was sick the night before, in the restroom and throwing up and, whatever, and maybe TMI. But I had to go to New York. Otherwise, I was going to miss out on this opportunity to screen test for it. And I was going to be in Boston for the rest of the week filming. So we managed to tell, again, I don't know how my mom pulled this off. We managed to tell the producers who knew that I had food poisoning that I couldn't come to work that day because I was in the hotel very sick. So they rearranged their schedule. And in reality, I got on an airplane with my stepdad at the time and flew to New York, sick and all, did my screen test, and then flew back that night to be able to work the next day on Spencer for Hire. So I rolled in and I rolled out, and I remember being really upset that my white turtleneck, I remember what I was wearing. I was wearing a white turtleneck and a red skirt. And I remember being upset that I got my white turtleneck dirty on the airplane on the way to the screen test. And I thought that it was going to matter somehow. But I rolled in, got the job, rolled out, went back to Boston to finish out the show. And the producers never knew that I had even left. And my mom, I guess, put a chair outside the room, and if anybody came by to see how I was feeling or how I was doing, she told them that I was asleep and that I was getting my rest and doing better. And I was actually in New York City screen testing for One Life to Live. Thank God, and I got the job.
Teamwork, everybody working together.
Oh my God!
Do you recall if you screen tested with another actor? Did you screen test with Shelley?
I don't. I mean, if anything, it probably would have been. Rafe, I probably would have, because I didn't have too much with Shelley. I think I had a lot more stuff. It felt like more consistent stuff with the dad character.
Right.
Yeah. So if anything, if I did, I don't remember, but if I did, it probably would not. It would have been probably just with him.
Well, you know what happened? I was kidnapped at the time in the basement.
Yes, that's right.
And Dee Dee. So I think that's probably why you did more scenes with Ken Meeker,
yes.
who played Rafe.
Yes, Ken, that's right.
Because I was kidnapped for about 2 months, and I had been lost in a snowstorm at one point, and I went to Lord Henry's house and knocked on his door. I went through the snow, and I reminded him of his dead wife, and so he put me in the basement, and I don't remember why Bo and Dee Dee were there, but anyway, I was there for a while, and I think they were just waiting for me to get out of the basement. So that's probably why you did more scenes.
I remember the scene or the day where you showed up for the first time. I remember our first day working together. I remember the gray carpeting and like a step down or 2 steps down, and you came in and you looked a wreck because you had been kidnapped and gone, and you came in and I was like, I don't know if I called you mom or I mean, I guess I did, right? I called you mom and I ran and I hugged you and we were reunited.
Oh, that's funny. I mean,
That's amazing.
I remember all of a sudden you grew, though. That was the one thing, because when I went to the basement, you were a baby, but it was, you were so professional. And I remember when they told us that you were the star in all these Halloween movies, and so we were very impressed, everybody on the set, because you were a much bigger, I mean, you were almost a much bigger star than all of us from the soap, because you had been doing movies, you know, and so that was a big deal.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah, I mean, I never came back. I left the show to go do Halloween 4, and then I came back and was back on the show for, I guess, another 8 or 9 months, and then I left again to do the sequel, and then I never came back after that. I mean, I'm assuming did they write me off, or did I get older again, or I don't even know what happened.
And what happened, I was singing, I had been singing in my real life off the show and doing cabarets for years and doing other theater things. And so I was singing on the show, and I was not working that much. You know, I had a show and a half guarantee, and I didn't have an interesting storyline. Rafe and I were happily married, and so there wasn't much that was happening, and they kind of just wrote me out to go to LA to do a TV series. And so that's probably, you know, you're
probably still there.
You went with me, and I remember saying, you know, I'm taking Sammy, Rafe, and we're going to LA, and hopefully you'll join us. And I think he stayed on the show. I mean, we didn't get divorced or anything, and it wasn't, I think it was amicable. All I know is I had moved to Florida, and so I just kind of was written out. But I was too nice of a character and too popular to be killed. You know, they only killed characters that were really bad. I mean, bad, like evil, you know, not like bad actors or anything. But
what do you remember about working with Ken Meeker?
Oh, well, you know, he was such a nice guy. I don't know, and I'm sure Danielle will remember. And for me, he was tall. I mean, it was, when I was married to Asa, Phil Carey was tall, and Bo and I were just the same height. But Ken was so tall, but he was so sweet, and my, was he handsome. And so that was a pleasure. And Danielle, I bet you have lovely memories of working with him.
I just loved him. You know, I adored him. I remember the suits and yeah, that's lovely. I really did have a lovely time, and I was lucky. I feel like everybody that I worked with growing up as a kid really were exceptional with me and kind, and, you know, really watched out for me and took care of me on set. And, you know, I still think about it every time I go to New York. I still, for some reason, you know, 56 West 66th Street, like, pops into my head. I'll never forget the address and the stairs outside. And I used to go to Roy Rogers for lunch, and, you know, things like that you remember when you're 9, like where you ate and what I ate there and what the dressing rooms looked like. And the woman who played Tina, Andrea Evans, I have pictures actually. Gosh, I should have thought of that before we were live. I've got a whole book of pictures from the was it the 100th episode? No.
Yeah.
It was a tavern on the green.
Yeah. I think it was either, you know, I don't remember what anniversary we were celebrating, but I do remember it was just this great party at Tavern on the Green. And Andrea, who played Tina, you were saying, but she was my roommate we shared a dressing room together, and so we had a great time. Anyway, that's
it's a loss. We lost her to breast cancer. She
no.
Yeah. What a lady. But 56 West 66th Street was recently sold. It's no longer an ABC building.
I know, that's so sad.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a shame.
ABC moved out of that whole area. They moved downtown.
Yeah.
So it's no longer the ABC headquarters. Shelley, talk about Phil Carey and Robert Woods. What do you remember about those?
Well, as I said, when I started, I was a Ralston because we thought we were cousins, and then I was a Buchanan when I married Asa, and it was really Asa and Clint and me, and Bob Woods, of course, and we were just like this family. I mean, it's amazing. And then, of course, Vicky Vicky was married to Clint, but Phil Carey was so funny. And the thing that I remember about all these guys is that they just treated me so well, and they really watched out for me. I mean, I had been working on Broadway, and was actually, when I first started on the show, I was in 9, and I did for about 6-7 months. I would go to work during the day at the soap, and then I would quickly make my half-hour call at 7:30. I mean, sometimes it was really close, but I said to the director, I've got to get out of here, so you got to make this scene go fast, or, get me out. And so I would get down to Broadway and do my show. But after doing both for a couple months, I just couldn't do both anymore, and I left 9. But the guys...
That's a lot to do in a day.
Well, and I was 24, and we just think we could do anything. I mean, at the time, it just seemed like, oh, I can do this, I can handle this, but it was really a lot. And, working from 7 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, and then quickly, getting and doing a Broadway show. But
well, I think that was the really special thing about soaps being done in New York, that the actors could do theater in the evening, they could work in the daytime.
Exactly, and a lot of them did, and we had a lot of actors come, and it was so funny though, because Broadway actors would kind of look down on the soap, and they would think, well, it's not real acting. And I would say, guys, I have a steady gig. I go to work, and I was working 5 days a week because I had a big storyline for the first few years. And I said, this is a regular gig. I'm not just, doing a small part in a show or working off Broadway or off Broadway, because I did all that. And I was just happy to have a regular job and make a steady paycheck and be a big star. I mean, I'm not touting my own horn, but the soaps were like, I try to tell my kids, were like reality television.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was on the show for 2 weeks, and I was walking down the street with Bob. We were going to have lunch, the actor, Bob Woods, who played Bo, and people were yelling at us down the street, there goes Bo and Delilah. And it was a little bit, oh my gosh, So it was amazing how prolific and how famous the soaps were, and people that were on the soaps were just, so it was a good time. But those guys were just great, and I loved working with them, and they watched out for me because they were a little bit older, and I was younger, and I was more influenced, I think, by everything, so they kind of took me under their wing and made sure I was okay, which was really sweet.
You must have learned a lot, both of you. I mean, Danielle, you were really young. But you were in your 20s doing a TV show like this. What do you think you took away from the whole One Life to Live experience, Danielle?
Everyone, I think, just felt, everyone felt like a movie star to me. I think walking out of those stairs, and like Shelley was saying, and the people that would be there wanting your autograph and taking pictures, and just the whole process was it happened very fast as well for me. So, I think it was a nice sort of introduction to what Hollywood would eventually feel like, especially for me doing, you know, a lot of horror movies. So it didn't take much time to sort of find my way and see that people were looking out and adults were wrangling and trying to teach me and take care of me. And I remember rehearsals, and there was like a rehearsal room off of where the main room kind of was. And I remember a long table, and we'd sit there, and I think I was doing school at the time too, and would walk down everyone's hallways and see everyone in their dressing rooms. And I think you could even smoke cigarettes back then in your dressing room, you know, and it was just like, it was just, you know, I don't think I've ever, you know, I've never experienced anything quite like that since. My best friend was on General Hospital. She's still, I mean, not as much anymore, but she was on from when she was a little girl until, you know, she was much older. She played Robin Scorpio. And so, yes, Kimberly. So I had a lot of we sort of kind of grew up with that same, you know, that in that same world. But I think New York soaps are very different than California soaps were at the time. A lot of very different mindset when it comes to, you know, the acting process and the creative process, for sure.
I agree. I had Kimberly on my show. She's very sweet, but I mean, talk about somebody who was the
God. Oh yeah. It's crazy. I mean, I would see her scripts, you know, all through our 20s, and I would visit her on set all the time. And I'm like, I have absolutely no idea how you remember all of this, how you get this the night before, and you have 120 pages to learn by tomorrow, and you just do. And we were talking before in the waiting room, and I could never do anything like that. And I've auditioned a few times here and there in my 20s for soap operas, and one of the things that they had required at the time was that we be off book even for the auditions, and it would be a lot of dialogue, and I could just never do it. My brain doesn't work that way. I think from doing film so young, I'm still so used to doing under 10 pages a day. Now, unfortunately, indie movies, you know, 10 pages a day is like a breeze, but it's a whole other way of performing and of training your technique and your craft that nobody will understand unless you actually were on a soap opera. And I give them a lot of credit. Anyone that poo-poos soap opera actors, you go try it for a day and see if you can do it.
Completely agree.
It was, and I have to say, I would get a lot of pages. We would get them a week ahead, and Bob taught me, go through and pull out all your lines, just, you know, all your pages, rip them out on Sunday, you know, do it on Sunday, and then you would have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then we were working on Saturdays because they were doing the Olympics in '84. And all the cameramen were going to leave because they didn't have digital then. And so we had to get even more ahead in our taping. We used to only be a week ahead. But I figured if I got my lines and I underlined them on Sunday, then I would just take one day at a time. And I could literally get my lines and learn them in the dressing room during, you would do dry blocking, and then before you went up on the set, while the other actors were doing their dry blocking, then I could learn my line, and then I could during our lunch break, I'd be putting my makeup on and just talking to myself, and we would just do one scene at a time, and it was amazing how your brain, you'd be surprised, Danielle, you would easily been able to handle it because you just do it. It's not and I thought, it's got to be Shakespeare every day, and Bob Woods reminded me, Shelley, you're going to do it again tomorrow. So you do the best you can, and then, if somebody's dying, like when I could finally cry real tears, that was a big deal, I mean, it was wonderful, and it was a great way to learn how to act. I mean, when Asa died, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to pretend that my husband is dead, and I didn't know how to do that. And Bob Woods, he would just say, Shelley, look in their eyes and just talk to them, and it was such a great, for me, also just a great training, because it was very different from being on the stage and doing the same show 8 times a week, But anyway, it was something else, and the learning of the pages, as I said, it would just be one day at a time. And if I had 60 pages or 20 pages, but you would just do the best you could, and then I would come in the next day, and so it was.
Take
I
out
had
one
really,
day and get the next one in there. Yeah, it's something else.
You could learn it all. And it was short-term memory, you know, it wasn't like I would do a scene and then it would be completely out of my head until the next, you know, the next scene, and then you'd learn that one. And then by the end of the day, everything was gone, and it was just, well, what are we doing tomorrow?
Well, also, like you said, Shelley, you learned from Bob Woods, but also Judith Light was on that set. Erica Slezak was on that set.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. And Bryn Thayer, who played Jenny, you know, and then Samantha. They were just such great examples, and I would get so nervous, you know, when the red light would go on. And, oh my gosh! But I somehow you just learned. But as I said, these other actors were such great help and so encouraging, and so I really learned, and I was very grateful. I was grateful for that job. I mean, I was on for 8 years, and it really promoted, you know, I had a lot of great memories, but it was hard, you know, getting up at 4, you know, early in the morning and getting there, and especially when I was doing both theater.
I can't even imagine that. Yeah. So. Danielle, you left Florida to move to New York City, I think, to pursue acting. Who or what inspired that at such a young age?
I was doing beauty pageants when I was in Florida. You know, it's the 80s. It's like what we did, I guess, what moms did with their kids when they had nothing else going on. So my mom and grandma would make my pageant dresses. And it's funny because my mom was, or actually my sister was just digging through, sitting on my desk, I'll show you, was just digging through some papers, and she found this fashion consultant's certificate that I had graduated modeling techniques. This is December 1984. So I was, you know, I did all, and then here's a picture actually from Spencer for Hire when I was on. My sister didn't know what it was. I was like, I'm pretty sure that was Spencer for Hire. So that was right around the time that I'd left there and went to go do One Life to Live. So I was doing beauty pageants and started modeling, and, you know, little teeny things in Florida. And then I had won this sort of modeling pageant that took me to New York. I'm pretty sure it was, in retrospect, thinking about it, it probably was one of those like, oh, pay us $10,000 and, you know, you get to come to New York and be it, and we'll teach you how to be an actress or a model kind of thing, you know, and my family didn't know. So I won this pageant that then cost us all this money to go to New York. And when I was in New York during the week that I was there, I had been approached by an agency in New York City, and I was still living in Florida, and it was called Little Rascals. And they pretty much said, if you ever find your way to New York, you know, we'd love to represent you. And ironically enough, my stepdad at the time, a few months after that, he was an electrician. He got relocated to New York City. He was building Epcot at the time, and it was done. And he got a job to go work in New York. And so we picked up and moved to New York. And my mom was like, we should call that modeling agency and see if you want to do this. And we were living in Queens, and they signed me. And I worked a lot as a kid because I was teeny and older than I looked. So I probably was a little bit more well behaved or could listen to direction a little bit better. So I did a ton of like modeling for, you know, much younger kid stuff, hand modeling for like little kid stuff. And my hands are still tiny. And I just slowly made my way from print to commercials to television stuff. And one, like, you know, after Spencer for Hire, my first gig, One Life to Live, was the very next thing that I got. And I didn't do TV after that, other than commercials, until many years later.
Wow.
Well, and what I remember too about Danielle, she just sparkled when you would come, and you just had this smile that was just electric. And I was just watching some old episodes, and I saw a scene that we did together. It's on, if you put Delilah, because my kids saw Delilah sings OLTL, and all these things came up of when I was singing on the show. But then there was a scene with the two of us, and it was so sweet. But you smiled, and it was just so precious. And so I'm sure that that's what everybody was always so taken by you, Danielle.
I loved working. I loved being on set. I loved being around adults. I loved the experience and learning new things. And I still, I hate the process of getting a job, but other than that, I love working on set is my happy place for sure in every way, shape, and form.
Yeah. It's a great way to learn, just being in that environment.
Yeah.
Shelley, is it true that you saw a show at 14 years old and that's what sparked your interest?
I was going to be a concert pianist. That was my big thing growing up as a kid, and I played piano, and I would play for hours. But then I went to go see a friend of mine in West Side Story at the time, and I watched it, and I mean, the show is so amazing, but I thought I could do this, and I could do this really well. And I mean, it was just this arbitrary thought that came in my mind, and I just started doing theater and taking classes and dancing, and I was so driven. By the time I turned about 17, I decided I was going to audition for musical theater, and I was in at Carnegie Mellon, the first musical theater class when they first started it, and but I was only there for a year at Carnegie Mellon, and I just moved to New York at 19 because I wanted to be a Broadway star, and so that was my big goal. But it was true. I went to see a show at 14, and it just sparked this drive in me, and I never stopped performing until only a few years ago, after my second husband passed away, Martin Charnin. He was my director and creator of Annie and wrote the lyrics, but I was doing cabaret just really until a few years ago, and I was just always very driven to keep going on the stage and singing, and
well, you only might have gone 1 year to Carnegie Mellon, but there is a lot of talent from Carnegie Mellon that have graduated and who have
Oh
spent.
my gosh, yes, I know.
It is quite the school for theater folks.
Yeah, I know. I had a great class, and most of those kids went on, and I mean, they're grown up, they're my age, but once you have that bug, that theater bug, I don't think it goes away. I mean, I now, my daughter says I'm retired, and I just like, no, that's not, I can't even, I mean, I'm not singing right now. I need to find a piano player. So actually, if anybody lives in Mission Vale, I want to have an old, a mature
send the
actress
piano
to come
player
and sing
Shelley's
with me.
way. Absolutely.
I'm looking for a piano player.
Danielle, we've talked so much about Halloween. Take us back to Halloween 4. Did you even know at that time what a horror film was?
No. I'm still shocked that we're talking about it this many years later. It still surprises me. No, I mean, I'd never seen any of them or really knew that much about them. I don't think I even saw the original Halloween until many years after that, but now I know all about it. And now it's consumed my world. I've leaned into it over the years. I mean, I only did two Halloween movies, and then I didn't do any horror at all for 20 years. So it's just ironic that people always kind of go back to that, and I think it's because of the resurgence. And when I came back in 2007 and the Rob Zombie ones, and sort of, I didn't realize that people had still loved that the character of Jamie as much as they did from back in the day, and welcomed me with open arms. And and at that time I was 30 and had gone through the 20s and the child actor stigma, and thank God didn't die during that time or do anything horrible, or didn't turn to drugs, didn't lose my life and go crazy, and a lot of the stuff that a lot of the kid actors have had to go through. So I had really great people around me for a long time, my whole career. I've always had that group of adults on set, whether it be directors or my co-stars or whatever it was. So yeah, I had no idea what that was going to end up being, but I definitely leaned into it as I got older and found a home in it. And now it's, I mean, it's kind of a similar, I would say, thing to performance wise as it is on soaps. You know, there's what's so great about horror movies is I get to be a lead and I get to have these amazing these scenes that show such a range of ability that you don't really get to do unless you're a movie star in other movies or a star of a TV show. And even then, you know, a storyline of at least, you know, non-cable shows back in the day before they had all these other opportunities for these great roles for young women looked very different than they do now. And horror was a way for me to really showcase what I love to do. And I always loved drama. I always loved to be able to cry and scream and all of those fun things. And the screaming comes with the crying. But, you know, I was always good at crying. Hence why I got on a soap opera very young, I think. So one kind of played into the other.
Is there a specific memory that stands out from Halloween 4 from the first?
Geez. You know, it's just, I remember the things that I remember about doing those movies and what I loved so much were things that a regular, you know, 10-year-old would love. I loved that I can order French fries into room service whenever I wanted and I didn't have to pay for it.
That would be my thing right there, Danielle.
It was like 8 a.m. I'm like, I'm going to order French fries. Like that was so exciting for me. And, you know, not having to go to school and getting to do school on set or in a hotel room and staying up throughout the night. And, you know, just those things were really fun for a 10-year-old. It wasn't about like, oh, I'm doing this movie. And I didn't really understand it until I got back to New York and was in Queens and the kids in school were starting to kind of notice and shift and a little more attention. And it was a little bit of a different vibe when I got back from doing the Halloween movies. I guess people thought that I was this, you know, movie star, so to say, but I don't know. It was just fun for me.
Oh, you were a movie star, because I remember, I mean, not to interrupt, but when we heard that Danielle was coming, you know, it was a big deal. You know, she was the
so
star
crazy to me.
Halloween movies, and everybody was so impressed, and you know, it was a big deal, Danielle. So, you know, congratulations on that, because it must have been a lot of fun. I coached a lot of kids. Martin and I did a lot of national tours of Annie and sent them out on the road, and so I know little girls that love to just be on stage. And
so the funny story, one of the first times, actually the first time that I went to Los Angeles was a screen test for Annie 2. They were going to make another feature, and they flew me to LA. And I stayed at the Bel Air Hotel, and I've got pictures somewhere of me in a red wig. And I screen tested, and the only thing is I don't sing. So, but they wanted to make it more of a drama, more dramatic. It wasn't supposed to be a musical, and I didn't get the part, and they never made the movie. But yeah, I screen tested for Annie too, which would have been kind of amazing.
All connection there.
Yeah,
that's great. I know there's been a lot of Annies. I just been on tour for a while. I mean, I was in New York. I saw Whoopi Goldberg play the Annie.
Right.
Oh my gosh, she was amazing.
I heard she was fantastic. Yeah.
Yes, and she was just the nicest person. I got to go backstage and thank her for all the creative team, and really from my husband. I said, he is so proud of you, and you know, we were both crying, and it was a great. But anyway, there's a lot of
that's awesome. Well, speaking of Broadway, Shelley, you got your first Broadway show at 1920 when you were cast as Sammy Davis Jr.'s daughter. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it was really something else. I've been in New York for only 8 months, and I've been doing auditions, but my first Broadway show, I was actually 20, and I played Sammy Davis Jr.'s daughter. He was married to this tall wife, and he had an African American daughter and a white daughter, and so but his wife was she was Marion Mercer, who is so funny, this great funny actress. And we were just towering over Sammy, but that was the joke. But he was talented, and I used to watch him sing. The end of the first act, they wrote a special song for him, but he would sing "What Kind of Fool Am I" at the end of the show, and I watched it every single night. And he taught me, you just sing from your toes and you let it all out and from your heart. And he was so talented. So I was really grateful to be able to work with him. And in my first show,
that's
now,
really...
It's crazy because I was working at Starbucks for a few years just to stay busy since I've been here in California. And these kids, they don't even know who Sammy Davis Jr. is, and I had to explain, I've worked on Broadway and I did this soap opera, and they could see me, but anyway, it's just, he was just so wonderful, and I was very privileged to be able to
I could watch him do anything.
Yeah, he was amazing.
Who are some of the mentors who've helped guide your path? Not necessarily career, could be, but Danielle, start with you.
Gosh, I just keep thinking of directors that have popped into my head. Tony Scott was someone that was in my life for a while and really guided me and helped along the way. Brad Dourif, another, horror. Aside from horror, he's known for that, but many other things. Academy Award winner. And it's ironic because, my dad in real life passed away right before I moved to New York, and my entire career has really been, if I think about it, which I'm now realizing as I'm getting older, it's always been myself and a dad. Even on One Life to Live, it was me and my dad until, mom came back. So every single role that I have had since then, if it's not some uncle chasing me, it's always dad. I don't really hardly ever have mothers in movies. I mean, don't tell mom the babysitter's dead. I had a mom, but she took off and was gone for the summer. So I have my sister, and there was no dad. But most of the films I've done, there's been a very prominent male figure in these movies. And I think they've all sort of guided me, whether it was the director or whoever was playing my father or my uncle. And they've really looked out for me over the years. It's been pretty crazy.
That dawned on you, because that's really something to have lost your real dad so young.
Yeah.
Was there a moment where it hit you that all of these men and characters?
I think it was probably somewhere in my 30s. Both. So once I got married, my husband and I struggled with IVF, with infertility for a couple of years, and I ended up doing IVF. And both my boys were frozen embryos, mine that were implanted. And they both took. So it's kind of funny because I didn't even really put two and two together about our storyline. And I mean, I knew that somehow I was in your body, but you didn't create me. But I don't think I really understood it until you just brought it up. Now, of course, I understand it because both my children were born that way. But I think that's really interesting, kind of how that became a part of my life. I mean, I've had a very interesting, weird life, and in parallel, my art has paralleled my life, or my life has paralleled my art. I don't know which has come first, but it's been pretty fascinating writing over the last year or so, and kind of uncovering all of these coincidences.
Well, you'll have to come back when the book comes out.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll do that.
Wow.
Shelley, how about yourself? Mentors who helped guide you along the way?
The year that I was at Carnegie Mellon, I had a dance teacher, Paul Draper, who had worked with Fred Astaire, and he just influenced me so much to be a dancer, and I was a singer primarily, and then he really, it was such a great class we had at Carnegie. So when I moved to New York, I started studying with Luigi, and so he really influenced me and made me a dancer. I had a voice teacher who I studied with for, 40 years, it seemed like. Aldo Di Tullio. He was up on 72nd Street, and
Great name.
I was so fortunate, and then when I worked with Martin, he was my director in Annie, and then we got married 25 years later. But
I was
really
going to ask you if
me.
that's how you met him.
That's how I met him. I was in the original production of Annie, and so it was crazy because the show opened in '77. I went into it in '79 because he hired a whole bunch of new actors. He wanted to make it fresh. But he was so charming, and we went out for a short time. But I was much younger, and he was much older, and so then we didn't see each other for 25 years. And then he told me he had been in love with me 25 years before, and it's just a really amazing love story. And then we just for 20 years did shows. And he would produce and write, and we would do all kinds of reviews, and he would always direct my cabaret and some plays we did. But as far as acting, I studied at Circle in the Square, and it was really important. I knew because I was almost going to be in chorus line while I was in Annie. I had auditioned a few times, and I was at this audition, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I want to do this 8 shows a week. I think I better learn how to talk. So I started studying at Circle, and Nikos Sakaropoulos was my teacher, and he just influenced me so much to really be, the method acting that I learned at Carnegie, and it was real method, like what Al Pacino and, all those intense guys. And then I went on the soap, and I tried to use the method acting there, and it was just like it was just do it, And so I learned, quickly that it wasn't Tennessee Williams or Chekhov or Ibsen or anything. We were just doing a job.
They didn't give you the time to really do that.
No, I had a scene with a psychiatrist at one point because Delilah was kind of losing it. And it was really, I could act then, and so it was kind of scary, and I would say, gosh, this is so vulnerable to do this in front of 15 to 30 million people, to kind of lose it, and so that was kind of scary, actually, in a way, but again, the actors would just say, Shelley, just do it again tomorrow and forget about it, slough it off. And
go home, get some sleep, learn your lines, come back again.
Yeah. So anyway, it was exciting.
Danielle, how did you meet Kimberly McCullough?
Just part of the kid actor circle, pretty much. And we've been best friends for a million years, and
you're both directing now.
Yes. Actually, when she was starting to direct, she would put me as her actress in all of her short films. So I was always playing her essentially. And we traveled all over together, and it's funny because she's come with me to like horror conventions just as my bestie, and people are like, oh my god, Kimberly McCullough, oh my god. And then which we don't think that it crosses, and then I've gone with her to Super Soap Weekend when they were doing that down in Florida a couple different times, and then people would be like, Jamie, or like yelling my character name, from across the way, like they can't understand. But I auditioned against Kimberly for a million things. We're very similar, so she was just part of that group, and we're survived child actors that have a lot in common.
Yeah, successful.
Yeah, she's doing great. She's doing wonderful.
Yeah, I had never met her, known about her for years. She was a delight. One of our fans, Kendra, said that Sammy Davis had been on One Life to Live.
Oh, really?
Back in the day.
I don't remember.
Yeah, back in the day.
Maybe that was before I was on it.
It might have been.
Yeah.
Shelley, what do you remember about Paul Rausch?
He was tough. He was tough.
I worked for him as well on Guiding Light, so I know.
Though I will say he was tough, and I was a little bit afraid of him almost because he was such a tough producer. But he sure got good work done, and I have to say, Joe Stewart was my producer when I started, and he was the one who hired me. And then the women who were Josie Van Emmerich, and I'm trying to remember the president of ABC. Anyway, but Paul Rausch was he was a great producer, and we did a lot of good work. But I didn't want to mess with him. I wanted to do everything he told me to do, And I was, as I said, a little bit intimidated. But
yeah, he was a tough one. Does that name ring a bell to you, Danielle?
I have memory of that name. I don't know what. I mean, obviously he was there. I think I just wanted to make everyone happy, so I don't think I had much fear or knew who was in what position. So it just whoever it was, I just wanted to be a good kid and make sure that I was well behaved and wasn't a brat, which I pretty much carried that with me throughout my childhood career.
Yeah. Jackie Smith was the president of ABC.
Jackie Smith.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, she was so wonderful. And Josie Van Emmerich, she was the vice president, and they were the ones who really hired me. That saw my screen test and really loved it a lot. And I will say about Paul Rausch, I sat down with him one time, and he influenced. I mean, he was so. As tough as he was so kind, and he really looked out for the actors, which I think was really impressive for a producer to do that, to care about the actors and just that they were doing, how they were doing and how are you, like as a person, which was, it can be a pretty cold business, and to have producers that really care, it was really special. So I'm very grateful to him, actually. Yeah.
He knew what he was doing. He might have been tough, but he really did, and he loved actors. He loved. I mean, without the actors, you got no story. He knew how to pull it out. Danielle, have you over the years come to love horror films yourself? Like, do you have a favorite? Do you watch some of the others that come out?
I am supposed to say yes. I'm kind of like a sober person that owns a bar. No, I love it, and I get it, and I know how to do them, and I know what makes them good, and it is a job for me. I think they're very difficult to make, and they don't get enough credit. I'm happy to say they're finally getting recognized for the work that really goes into them, which is lovely and long overdue. So I do. It's hard because they're all my friends, So to watch them and know that I know probably half of the people in them, it kind of takes me out of it sometimes. But I have a lot of respect for it, and it's a very small community. We all know each other. We all work together over and over again. I mean, there really is a little core group of us that have been doing it for many years, and I'm happy with the family that I have here. That's for sure. And also I have the liberty to kind of pick and choose, roles that I want to do. And thank goodness for fan conventions and things like that, and podcast stuff, and ways to other ways to implement income, so I can be home with my kids and be a mom. And I'm not running back and forth to auditions and doing that stuff anymore. I mean, who's running to auditions anymore, But
yeah, not many people.
No.
Barbara Crampton.
Yeah, of course they do. She's actually working with my partner in crime, my other friend that does the podcast with me, and also another horror movie actress, is directing Barbara right now. Barbara's great. Barbara gets all the ladies together all the time. All the ladies of horror. If anyone needs anything done, Barbara Crampton will get it done for you.
I love that. I love that. Tell everybody about your podcast.
Yeah, so it's called Talk Scary to Me. As you can see, I've got Michael Myers standing over there, hiding over there in the corner. We're produced by Bloody Disgusting, and we're podcasts where you find podcasts. We're on every Tuesday. We were on this morning, and it's great. It's basically just talking about things that are scary to talk about: love, relationships, mental health, a lot of sex stuff, a lot of relationship, a lot of horror stuff. Also, just for a way for the fans to get to know a different side of their favorite genre actor. Where a lot of the people are intimidated. A lot of fans are intimidated to ask some of these scary scream queens or monsters personal stuff. And I think over the years we got a little bit a little bit bored of being asked the same questions at appearances and with fans, and we wanted to open up a bit more of our lives and have everybody know that we're a lot more like them than maybe they're aware of, and it's created a really amazing community for us. I have my own Patreon and have a great community there. It's if it weren't for the fans, we wouldn't be able to have survived, for at least for me, all of these years. Have followed me since One Life to Live, probably. And I'm always shocked, though, when someone comes up to me at a horror convention and is like, I remember you, One Life to Live. I've been watching you with my mom. When I was just 5 years old, I used to watch. And that's how I got started watching soaps. My grandma, my mother, my sister still sits in her car. If she's watching this right now, she still sits in her car at her job during her lunch break and watches soap operas.
Oh,
I'm like,
amazing.
all these years, you're 40. All these years, you're still watching soaps every day. It's I used to fold laundry with my grandma, and soap operas were just on. I mean, that's
what were you watching?
One Life to Live. It was all ABC, General
It was all-
Hospital, One Life to Live. Yeah, of course. All My Children.
Yeah.
The good old. We were never a little bit of Days of Our Lives, but that was when I got a little bit older and I was in acting class with some of the actors. I actually directed my only play that I've ever directed. I had Austin Peck star in from Days of Our Lives.
I worked with Austin.
I love Austin. We were in acting class together, and I wanted to do this. I was always scared of theater and wanted to direct and didn't know, what it would take to direct film, but I knew that I could rent a little black box theater and pay for it and have my friends and write something and just create something cool and see how it felt to work with actors and work on performance, which doesn't happen as much as we like to, and not coming from a theater background and not getting to really dig into something for very long. I loved it. And that's why I ended up starting to direct film and stuff like that. But it's a different beast. I still am. I just directed a movie in December, a horror movie, and I still really was only interested in working with the actors on their story and their characters and the creative process of it, more so than the camera setups and working with DP. And now I'm in post and I'm loving putting all the pieces together and doing all that
What's
stuff.
the name of it for people?
Last Chance Motel. It stars Heather Langenkamp, who was in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and a lot of really good people, and it's really fun. So
Well, everybody, keep your eyes out for it.
yeah.
Shelley, you grew up because of your dad in politics, right?
I sure was. And
What-
my dad. Well, he was chairman of the GOP. Now, this was a different Republican Party. And I would say that right.
I mean, and just politics in general were so different back then. I mean,
Yeah.
how is that in your eyes of how it's changed over the years?
Well, I mean, my dad was chairman in '64, and then he was chairman of the FCC from '69 to '73, and he was an advisor to Nixon. Right at the end of Watergate, and that was just horrible. And then he stayed with Jerry Ford. And we had friends who were Democrats, and we spent holidays with our friends, and it wasn't like it is so divisive right now. I mean, but I was able to sing the national anthem at several Republican conventions, and it's been that was in the '80s. But I don't know what to say. I mean, I grew up.
Yeah, but watching that as a child, what do you think you learned watching your dad in those roles? That's just so interesting.
Well, my dad's best friend, for instance, was George Bush Sr., and it was just a different. They were our friends. These very, the Attorney General and so it wasn't like it is now. I mean, and for me, I was young. I was in my teens, and
Well, you both of you have children. I mean, Shelley, you said your children are in their 30s and late 20s. Do you see any of them following in mom's footsteps here? Your boys, Danielle or Shelley?
They better not.
No, it's funny because my kids, they grew up watching me or waiting for me, in the audience, and then to take them home, and watching me sing in clubs. I mean, I had them in nightclubs when they were little, singing. But no, I think I embarrassed them probably. Now they're not, and then certainly not in politics. They're just kind of normies, I guess.
Normies, good term. Shelley, what was your go-to song, your favorite song to sing in your cabaret?
Well, because I made Unusual Way, I did the original production of Nine, and I originated the role of Claudia in Nine, and Unusual Way was my song. So, I mean, it became this really famous song that so many people use still in auditions, and it was a beautiful song, so I always sang that. And but when I was doing the cabaret, it would be different, Irving Berlin or George Gershwin. Then Martin would write some music when we were doing shows together. I mean, I've just sang so many songs, but usually Unusual Way is kind of my go-to.
I got to see Nine the revival of Nine when it came.
Oh, really?
With Antonio Banderas.
Banderas, yeah. So I didn't see that, but I know it was very well received. So we just had a 42nd anniversary or something like that, because the show opened in '82, and we won the Tony, and then so there's several women that are still celebrating, it's funny about the soaps too, because when I would be working, I was at Starbucks not too long ago, the kids there would say, "Oh, my grandmother used to watch you on One Life to Live," and I was like, "Yeah, I could see your grandmother." Because I am a mature adult. I've paid my dues, and I'm still here. But I miss singing, and I miss performing, and so that's something.
Oh, I bet.
I've got to get back to that.
Yeah. Well, we need to find you a piano player. Ladies, thank you so much for doing this.
Sure. Thanks for having me. This was fun. It was so great to reconnect with you, Shelley.
Yeah, so great to see you, Danielle. And you're so professional, and so I would love to see some of your films and read your book, of course. So
yes.
I definitely would love that. So thank you, Alan.
We'll stay in touch, Danielle. We'll do this when the book comes out. Shelley,
Absolutely.
Pleasure. Danielle, a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Bye, ladies.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you to Shelly Burch and Danielle Harris for spending the hour. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. If you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can do so down below. Turn on the notifications for reminders of all upcoming shows. And I hope if you liked today's episode, you click the like button. And remember, you can stream audio versions by just searching The Locker Room on your favorite podcast app. I hope you all have a safe and happy Memorial Day weekend. I will see you soon.